welcome to the first fireside chat of our community summer camp. For those that don't know, we started community summer camp somewhere at the beginning of this quarter. It's a campaign that we're running for the entire quarter, and the aim is to bring back memories or the spirit of summer camp, which some of you might have experienced as well. We probably all remember camp, and it needs to be a fun experience, obviously, but also some might describe it as a very educational experience. So we decided to combine both and then center it around what I would say is a camp favorite subject, which is community building or just community. I think also for summer camp, community seems kind of like a logical thing. So it's probably also how we got to it. To help me make sense of the more creative strategies around building community, we've invited Erik Martin. You can see him on screen, VP of Services at Commsor. Hey, Erik.
Hey, excited to be here, and yeah, it's I think summer camp and community go hand in hand. So
yeah, have you actually experienced summer camp?
I was just thinking about this. Not only have I experienced summer camp and went to a lot of camps as a kid, my first real job was teaching or being a counselor at summer camp. So
really?
Yeah, I did a sort of very small, local, generic sort of summer camp, where I did a little bit of everything, and then I also taught at a tennis camp. So I think camp counselor and community professional. There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah. This is awesome. I didn't know. We could not have planned this better. Who writes these scripts? It's amazing.
I know. And I feel like if I need removing splinters or dealing with bee stings, I'm still world class, even though I haven't done it in decades.
Oh, there we go. Let's hope that doesn't happen during this webinar. I mean, crazier stuff has happened during inside of webinars, but we'll see. So we'll have Erik intro himself. But first, a little housekeeping. Yes, we will record the webinar. Yes, we will also send it to you afterwards. Don't worry. If you have any questions, just post them in the chat, like some people have done already, introducing themselves. Hello, everyone from Oklahoma and Canada. And if you have questions and do post them in the chat, I'll try to weave them into conversation as much as possible. It's that I have two children in the back, so if you guys hear screaming, I do apologize. And also, it's crazy hot in here, so if I start sweating during the webinar, it's probably due to that, I think. We'll see. Are we good to go, Erik?
Yeah, let's do this.
Awesome. All right, then to start us off, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your past community experience, because some people might have checked your LinkedIn and seen some pretty amazing companies there.
Yes.
Love to hear.
Welcome, everyone. See a few familiar names in the chat already. But yeah, I got started in this world of community actually from the marketing side. Was doing marketing for a lot of independent films, smaller music projects, basically entertainment things without a very big budget. And so got into all these different communities that were emerging, very early social media forum days, early 2000s. And then was lucky enough to be the first community manager and fifth employee at a little company called Reddit. And worked there for 6 years. Was a general manager by the end of that for the last few years, and worked on everything from community to ad sales, all kinds of stuff. And then did a bunch of different community things since then. Launched a company called Depop in the US, which is an amazing sort of community-based version of eBay, if you're not familiar. Lots of cool fashion stuff that I was never cool enough to actually pull off in person, but I love the community there. Love the marketplace. Also worked at WeWork.
Thanks for trying.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to help me, but I was beyond help. But then also, did community at WeWork, especially how do you build community between people who are in the office spaces, but worldwide across cities and countries. Which was really exciting. Also did some community projects at Nike as an entrepreneur in residence. We ran a community for job seekers at a company called Teal. And then recently I joined Commsor about a year ago. And at Commsor, I help companies with hiring community professionals, and then also consulting on community strategy.
Awesome. That's quite a list, and also the names of the companies on the list are super impressive. So I have some questions about them in a second. But first, we're here to talk engagement strategies. Yeah. So what is engagement to you?
I mean, to me, it's like, how do you, my very like simple definition of community, or the lens I look at it through is the members talking with each other or interacting with each other, right? That's why ideally, what's driving a lot of the activity in a community is people talking directly to each other, whether that's on Slack, a forum, insighted, at an event, in person, whatever. But if they're talking directly with each other at scale, to me, that's the sort of building block of community. And engagement is like, how do you increase that, right? How do you increase the nodes or the links in between the nodes in the network, to use a sort of network language? But like, how do you get more connections between people? And at scale, that starts to have emerging patterns and subgroups and all kinds of interesting stuff. But really, like, I think, how do I get more people talking to each other? How do I get more people introduced to each other so that they can start building those connections?
Yeah, exactly. I think especially in B2B, but probably also in B2C, this is usually seen as the holy grail of building community. You need to see engagement, otherwise it's dead. And you need to see more engagement, and preferably also growing engagement month over month to sort of define your community program as a success. So if you, for example, look back at Reddit, then because engagement at Reddit doesn't really seem a problem, was this still something that was top of mind that you were trying to measure, increase?
Yeah, like I think the sort of simple beauty of the Reddit system was that relatively early on, but not at the beginning, anyone can create a subreddit, right? So if you are in the subreddit for your local city or a political, belief or cause, or a video game you're a fan of, whatever, and you don't like the way it's run, or you think it's gotten too big, you want something more intimate, you want something more focused on XYZ, you can create a new subreddit. And over time, a lot of those, a lot of those subreddits have sort of forked, and now have, there's not just one subreddit around a given topic, there's 20. And some of them are super niche, some of them are more, informal, some of them are super serious and full of jargon. But I think that's what's really been amazing for engagement on Reddit, is that, when the communities there didn't have the curse of success, where, okay, there's a great community for a TV show or video game or whatever, and it becomes so big that what made it amazing in the first place is now lost. That happened, but then when it happened, people could kind of overflow and move into these other spaces. And I think that's something that, somehow the recipe, the ingredients in Reddit worked very organically. But, those of us in sort of community building, especially in B2B spaces, try to balance as well. Like, okay, we now have critical mass. Maybe we start opening up local sub, channels or sub forums, but you don't want to do too early and spread people too thin. So that's one of the things I think about a lot, is like, how do you create those sort of different forks or warrens or little subgroups? And yeah, it's art and science there.
It truly is. Yeah. So because you're now at Commsor, for example, we all know the community club Slack channel, which we all love. So would you say there are major differences between what you've seen at Reddit, for example, and trying to keep members engaged and trying to keep everyone engaged in the community club Slack channel?
Yeah, I think the basics are pretty similar, and the basics are true across all of the communities I've been a part of. Those basic rules, like the 90-10 rule or the 90-9-1 rule, in terms of the 10% of super users are going to be responsible for 90% of the content or engagement. That's true, no matter what medium and platform and subject you're in. But I think the professional community that we're building for community people at Commsor and Community Club, engagement there is interesting because you have so many different perspectives coming in. You have people, and I think that's the challenging part. You have people who are looking to learn more about community because they're interested maybe in pivoting from higher education, from customer support, from adjacent fields, from marketing. And they want to, maybe their next gig, they're looking at something in community management. You have people who've been in the field longer than I have. You have people who are, working for B2C brands and B2B software. And so balancing all of that, I think, not just in Commsor's Slack, but sort of when we talk about the community industry itself and the spaces where we talk to each other, I think that's always the challenge. Is community is a broad and beautifully expanding topic. So how do we talk about the things that we all share, but also create spaces where we can talk specifically about our section of the ecosystem is always a challenging.
Yeah, balance. Exactly. Yeah, I read, I think 2 days ago or something, that I think it's now the 55-25-20 rule is what the community roundtable calls it now. So it's no longer 90-91 or 90-9-1. Yeah. I think anyway, it's changing. Probably is data backed and well researched. I don't know. I haven't read it yet, but that's what I read at least. So maybe let's just deep dive into the concept of engagement and how you get people to engage. So one of the first things that we at least always hear is that community is quite a heavy load on a team, because you just need to do so much to at least get it started and then hopefully reach that pinnacle point where a community grows by itself and you have members participating and everyone else. And I think the first thing that is a roadblock for most teams is content. So how have you, in your experience, or maybe now or in the past, approached content and content generation? Is this something that you've done yourself and hired people to do, or did you find clever ways to actually get content to scale for your community?
Yeah, so I think, content, especially at the beginning when you're trying to get that critical mass, and I think it's a challenge, and there's a few things you can do to make it easier on yourself and also easier for the members to understand how to jump in. And I think of content as like a genre, right? So you want to create enough of a container, enough of a brand or boundary around the activity, so that people can come in and they understand what's expected of them and how to participate, how to play in the game. So, they understand that if it's a Western, there's going to be horses and cowboy hats, and there's all sorts of freedom and flexibility within that space, but they understand the basics of the game. And I think there's a few content types that can work well for that. So, something like asking people, one we use as in most communities is sharing pet photos, right? That's a great one, where people can, it's not gonna do everything you want out of the community, but as far as an easy, low friction way to get people to start sharing something, that's a good one. Sharing wins people have achieved, usually on Fridays, is another one that is very it's obvious when people come in, okay, here's what I'm supposed to do here. A place where people can, easily ask for help or connections, or if someone knows something, someone knows someone at a company, ask for an intro. This type of channel, depending on the community, can make sense. And I would say whether that's a channel or that's sort of a recurring content prompt, the clearer it can be for the members of the community, but also for your own team. You want to make it as clear as possible so that it's very easy to come up with a new way, or come up with something for that week. Almost by narrowing in the topic, the type of content, it's sort of an enabling constraint there, because it's easier to come up with something. So exactly that. Also, deputizing sort of community members early on. And the key there, is to ask them to participate for a finite period of time. So say, hey, we love the stuff, love the things you've been posting or sharing or answering in the community. There's a week next month. For that week, would you mind sharing something, once a day, just for 5 days? Or would you mind sharing something every Monday this coming month? Just make the ask really, really, clear, but also, a finite period of time, just for 10 days, 5 days, whatever. And I think that makes it easier for them to say yes and really commit to it and do the work, because they know it's not a forever thing. So that's another thing I found to work when you're sort of trying to, deputize ambassadors or super users or ask members of the communities to participate.
Yeah, I like that. I especially like the finite part of it. It's pretty smart. So when do you start deputizing community members? Is that something you can actually start out with when you're starting a new community? And maybe the second question is also, can you also do that in B2B?
Absolutely. I think you can start, I don't think there's such a thing as starting, too early, within reason, because, the earlier, and if it's still in the early days and the sort of beta or private beta version of the community, then you're really making those members feel like they're part of sort of building this, and they are. It's not just superficial. They're really helping to set the tone and the direction and the sort of vibe of the space, and so you can ask them early on, and or at least ask them, what types of, what are the things you wish were covered in our industry that you don't see, or the types of discussions. What are the things we should be talking about in our industry that we're not, or you're not finding the right sort of peers to talk with about, and start there. And then as far as in B2B space, absolutely. I think what I've found is maybe the sort of intrinsic incentive is a little bit different versus in B2C space. And in B2B, the people who make really good, super users or sort of content ambassadors and space leaders they're trying to find their voice, right? They may be, maybe their boss or whatever told them to create more content and sort of be a thought leader, but they haven't figured out, what type of stuff to share or what their little niche is. So doing so in a B2B, community gives them a sort of built-in audience, even if it's super small, and sort of a safe space to experiment with, posting content that prompts discussion, with leading small groups, with, curating content on their own. So that's, I think, what I found the best sort of content prompt type people in a B2B space are looking for. They're looking to experiment and sort of get better at the craft of doing that in somewhere that's not out on LinkedIn or a huge ocean of social media, where they can really get some feedback and figure out what works for them.
I think commonly people usually consider B2B to be too much technical content, maybe even, especially if it's a community for like a software product or something else. And that technical content being difficult to get into or engage with the majority of what they would consider their community, I guess. What do you think of the notion of B2B being too technical to actually sort of have engagement around these topics?
I think, I don't know. Yes, obviously there's a certain baseline level of knowledge that's probably needed from a technical perspective in some of these communities. But I think especially when you're able to have a wide range of experience levels, which is pretty common in these types of communities, that can help some too. So you can. That's where the job of the community manager, it's important to say, hey, most of us are experts in XYZ, but we do have people who are coming in who may not be as familiar. So, really, really try to make sure there's a entry point that explains things in more layperson's terms, or, if you're, a software engineer, but you're not familiar with this particular language, this is the sort of paradigm we're talking about. And if you have different levels in the community in terms of experience and knowledge, that'll happen naturally. People will ask questions who are sort of new to the space, and more experienced people will be able to answer. And I think in general, as long as it doesn't become overwhelming, as long as people are asking, specific questions, the people with more experience are usually excited to talk about what they know and give back. So I think. Yeah. That's the great thing about having a different levels inside a community, even if it's pretty technical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you already touched upon member participation a little. I remember when I was still at a huge Dutch telco, and we also had a community, mainly Q&A, but we had a community, and I think the most or at least the best thing we could do for someone that had shown they were engaging around a certain subject or answered a lot of questions around a certain subject, is just give them a title, right? iPhone expert or something like that, which actually was a working title back then, and people seem to love that kind of stuff. So, but is that something that is still sufficient, or how do you guys basically treat members that, for example, in the community club Slack channel are truly participating, are yielding a lot of value for other members?
Yeah, I mean, in the sort of messy, ephemeral, conversational nature of Slack makes it maybe a little bit more challenging to sort of add, titles and badges and those sorts of things versus more, robust platforms like Incited, certainly. But I think some of that happens organically. I think the nice thing about, these sort of messy platforms is you learn those things over time. So there's these sort of almost like inside jokes or someone you'll see like, wow, this person's really good at mentioning people who might be able to answer this question. And those sort of reputations and the what people are known for internally. It takes a little more time, but it's a little more organic. So I think, there's advantages to both, but certainly that's something that I think, I know in Community Club, we could certainly do a better job of making it clear, like, okay, this person is an expert in XYZ. So when they answer, that should be taken into account. And I think over time, all of these sort of communities of practice and different support communities, the activity individuals do in those members, the value they're giving for other members, it's going to be easier to sort of travel with them outside of that particular community. It would be, the same way if you're, if I'm trying to hire a developer and they share their, Stack profile, I can see all the amazing, really difficult, thorny questions they've been able to help someone with. They probably know what they're doing. So I think that'll be the case in other communities as well over time.
Yeah, I always struggle with sort of these types of recognition a little bit, because it can also limit conversation from other community members, because people will then be scouting for the ones with the colored names or the fancy titles or something else, versus just accepting an answer from anyone that's trying to contribute and probably maybe also has the right answer. So yeah, it's always it's an interesting thing. But if you have a growing community, then probably also less of a problem. So we have about 9 minutes left, and I want to cover 3 more things. So we're gonna do that quickly. So the first is team. Let's imagine a random B2B software company. Who should be involved with a community project internally?
I would say, and I'm not just saying this to be glib, like most of the company, right? Most of the company, unless it's huge, but if it's a random B2B software company that's of a small or medium size, everyone should be involved, especially in terms of once the private version is launched, and at least being somewhat active during those critical early first few weeks, to make sure there's a critical mass and critical sort of level of audience, and everyone who joins the community gets welcomed or messaged. So that's one thing I'd point out. But in general, I would say, definitely support, definitely marketing, and definitely someone at the executive level who can really see the great thing about, and the powerful thing about community is it cuts across all the traditional sort of silos, right? Commsor did a community report earlier this year and looked at where community teams sit in terms of, under which sort of C-suite department at organizations. And it was all over the place. Marketing and support were the most popular, but there were, mature, amazing community teams that sit under R&D or product or operations, or like Commsor have their own sort of C-suite department. And those all make sense. So the nice thing about community is that it can touch every part of the business. I think that's also challenging, because it's different from company to company, even if they're similar B2B software companies. So I would say, something like, to make sure you have some, C-suite executive level support and sponsorship, but then also definitely want to make sure you're you're heavily involving both marketing and support, anyone who's interacting with the users, with the customers as well.
Yeah, I like that. I totally agree. It's a shame that it's still so hard for so many B2B companies to actually get this done, especially on the executive side. It's very hard to get people to actually engage, or at least be engaged with the project. So it's a shame, but hopefully that grows. I think it has grown a lot also in the past 2 years or so, as community has also evolved a little. So maybe transitioning to what is also important for them, which is KPIs. So when you're building out engagement strategies, campaigns, everything else for community, what would you consider solid KPIs to look at, and what would you be looking at yourself?
Yeah, I think again, the great thing about community is it can touch all the parts of the business, which also makes picking those 1 or 2 important KPIs challenging, because there's quite a few that you could logically pick from. I would say you want something that has to do with growth, right? Referrals is one I like a lot, and not just NPS, but actual referrals. Has someone in the community referred another customer, another member? Are they inviting people, other people inside their team at a customer account? So actually being able to track that, ideally you can track it in terms of the actual referrals, but even surveying and saying, hey, have you invited someone into this community or told someone about this community in the past 30 days or whatever? Something like that is important, and is a good way to measure sort of the organic growth of the community and the word of mouth, and then something in terms of retention. So especially if you can track it on a cohort basis to see where your work, where your changes and initiatives are having an impact. So looking at how whatever sort of engagement cadence makes sense. Some communities, it makes sense for people to come daily, some weekly, some monthly, but whatever makes sense for you. Looking at what's that pattern over time, because retention,
like monthly active users, daily active users, those kinds of measurements.
And what's the how does that change? Usually people are going to be oftentimes more engaged in their first week or month. And then there's a drop off, which is part of that's natural. But how do what can you do to make sure that people are coming back, even if they've been there already for 6 months or 3 months or 3 years? So I think that's, as long as you have one KPI that's sort of more on the growth side, and one that's more on the retention side, that'll steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you see, and maybe 2 questions. So how have you seen community evolve in the last year or so? Because I think it's become a little different, especially from a B2B perspective. And also, where do you see community going in the next 2 years or something? Sure.
So actually, same sort of answer for both questions. And I find, so there's something called a community of practice. And there's different types of community and different ways to sort of slice and dice them. But we define a community of practice as people who are peers in their given profession or endeavor. So Commsor's community club, which is in our case, a Slack community for community professionals, would be a community practice. Whereas you have other types of communities, are like a community product or a support community or a customer community. Those have been around a little bit longer, but communities of practice, we're really starting to see those pick up, especially in the B2B space. I think, like a lot of things, accelerated by the pandemic, but you're seeing even in super niche fields, companies are basically creating a community where their target audience can talk with each other, can talk with the peers. Sort of independently, people have created those to be relatively agnostic of the company that's, providing the space or sponsoring the space. So, the other day I learned about a company, they make software for gymnastic studios. That's what they do. Just for gymnastics. No other, if you're doing a fitness studio or whatever, aerobic studio, nope, but just gymnastic studios. So they created a community for people who run gymnastic studios. Very niche audience. There's 1,000 people in it. It's on a Facebook group, but it works awesome for them. And I think we're seeing more and more of those, especially as the economy maybe flattens or goes down, just because when there's uncertainty, people are trying to figure out how to do more with less. Maybe people are laid off or nervous about their next job. People want to talk with their peers.
Yeah, exactly.
Big uptick in those.
I think that's also a good point to make, is that you don't need 50,000 customers to be able to start a community project. You can also do it with 100 very engaged customers that can definitely help you out there. I think that's a good call to make. And you already brought up the economy. That was going to be my final point. So that's a nice sort of segue into the economy. So maybe to give my sort of view. So I feel like, especially in B2B and software, SaaS, a lot of companies are currently being asked to be at least more efficient. And I think community actually plays a really nice role when it comes to being more efficient as a company and being more efficient with customers and customer communication and maybe even digital engagement, digital customer success, all of those subjects. So how do you view the role of a community in what we should probably call like economic uncertain times?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll repeat myself, but community can touch all the parts of business, and I think community can actually make all the parts of the business more efficient. So, on the support side, obviously, people can help curate and crowdsource and answer and raise and identify problems or issues or integrations or whatever more efficiently than just a traditional manual approach. On the marketing side, community and word of mouth and people inviting the people they know can be way more efficient than paid ads and all of these other things that have diminishing returns. And then I think maybe the most important but the most hard to quantify aspect of being efficient is community can tell you where to go and where not to go. So with limited resources, you have to be really smart about the choices you make, what to invest in, what bets to make, where to focus, where to not focus anymore. And if you can listen to your community, if you can, listen both passively as an observer and sort of in an effort of knowledge capture, but also actively by asking your community members in, as a whole or in small groups, and get their feedback before you invest too much resources in a direction that maybe is not going to be fruitful. I think that's where a community can save companies tons of money. But that one's a little bit harder to quantify.
It's harder to quantify, but I don't know. I feel like it's just a logical explanation of what a community actually is. It can also do for you. I think the only thing I would add to that is that everyone should realize that their customers are going through the same thing. So if they're providing a location for customers to actually have those discussions with you and with each other and everything else, that would be a massive help and a massive opportunity, I think, also for a company. I want to end with two questions from Carmelito. The first is, can you elaborate on some useful metrics to report to management in a community of practice?
Yep. So the important metrics in the community practice, I would say, is again referrals, right? So if you're creating this community for a specific area of practice, an emerging profession, a discipline, people that are in sales ops or something like that, the primary motivation there, the value prop, is that people come to talk to each other, to their peers. And so if they're not inviting their peers, then there's something not quite right that needs to be adjusted. So looking at do people actually refer, invite, share, talk about this community in terms of word of mouth is a really useful one. And then as far as reporting to management, then it would be like how many of our customers are in this space, and do those customers on average, spend more money, larger accounts, whatever makes sense, retain more, whatever the right revenue metric is for you. Because you're sort of saying like people that are in this community are better customers. So those are the two types of metrics I think would be most useful for most cases for communities of practice.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Hope that helps, Carmelito. And then the final question. Recently, I had a potential client tell me that they have too much to do already and they feel it's not the right time to start a community. When is the right time to start a community?
Yeah. I mean, if a client or the executives or whoever, the decision makers, feel it's not the right time, that you don't want to, it probably isn't, just because if they're not bought in, it's going to be really difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. I would say the right time is has to do with the the demand on the side of the user. So the right time is when you feel like there's a gap, there's a need out there. Your customers or potential customers, if they don't have a place to talk to their peers, if they don't have a place to talk about your product, they're, there's value in them talking, again, members talking to each other. If there's a real need for that, a hunger for that, whether it's on the community practice side or community product side, that's when it's the right time to start a community. It's a tricky thing to gauge, but that's when it really makes sense, because there's a real demand from the users themselves.
Yeah, and I would also say that if that demand exists and you don't do it, somebody else will.
Yeah.
So I think that's also super important to keep in mind. If there truly in your space is a reason for your customers, prospects, other people to just connect around the subject, then you might as well try and own it, right? Carmelita says, "Cool, thank you very much." So I think that is a perfect answer. We're also out of time. So I would like to thank you, Erik, for spending roughly 30 to 40 minutes with us and sharing your knowledge. I would like to thank everyone in the audience for actually being here. That was pretty amazing. Two final things. So this was the first of the fireside chats of the Community Summer Camp campaign. There will be two more. One will be around building a community team, and the other will be around vendor selection, getting buy-in internally, etc. One with Mathieu from BMC, and the other with Katie Ray from, well, no longer with Clary, but now with Metadata. So two awesome sessions will be announced later. And as mentioned, this recording will be shared as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I see some thank yous in the chat. Thank you. And we hope to see you guys.
One more thing we should talk about. Actually, our companies have actually collaborated on a free learning module. So over in C School, we have a new course that we just put up today that we actually partnered with Insighted on, called Driving Customer Success Through Community. So the course isn't live yet. The course is going to be free. It's really geared towards people who are in customer success already or adjacent, and helping them take advantage of community. It's a free course. It's going to be launching soon, but you can sign up, and I'll put the link in the chat, and then we'll notify you as soon as it is live. But really cool. We are really excited to work with you all on this. And yes,
cool. Can't believe I forgot.
But check that out. It's really cool. You can see all the modules, see kind of like what you'll be learning. It's like a online course that's self-paced. So check that out. Sign up. It's going to be. I already saw some of the material. It's going to be really pretty good. But cool. We had a chance to collaborate on that one. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll speak to you guys soon. Talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.